Welcome to Vantage Points, a program designed to explore issues and topics of local interest. And now, here's the host of Vantage Points, Calvin Carter.
Welcome again to our program. With me today is Chris Johnson, Director of Communications for the Fuller Center. Chris, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
The Fuller Center for Housing is a nonprofit ecumenical Christian housing ministry. Let's start off with a very basic question about that. Can you give us some history on the Fuller Center?
Yes, well, the history actually goes back more than 4 decades when Millard and Linda Fuller learned about partnership housing from a theologian named Clarence Jordan down in Sumter County, Georgia, and that led them to found Habitat for Humanity back in 1976, and then in 2005, kind of as a return to the basic grassroots Christian principles they started the whole ministry. They went back and founded the Fuller Center for Housing, still in Americus, Georgia.
40 years, has the ministry expanded and changed its scope?
Yes, of course, Habitat is still going strong, but they were dismissed from Habitat after some disputes with the board, but they saw it as an opportunity to get back with the original principles that they started with, and they went to Africa in 1973 in the heart of the Congo, which was then Zaire, and they tested partnership housing and built more than 100 homes there, and they decided if they could make it work there, they could make it work anywhere, and they brought those same Christian principles to the Fuller Center for Housing, and though Millard died in 2009, we remain true to those principles today.
Let's talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of the thing. How do you get this accomplished?
Well, we work through what we call covenant partners, which are basically chapters or local affiliates, and we have more than 70 in the United States and more than 20 countries that we work in, and each one, we allow all the decision-making about whom we work with, how to do it, how best to help the community. We leave those decisions in the hands of the local leaders because we have some basic guiding principles, like we don't charge interest to the poor and things like that. But we believe each local community is best equipped to make their own local decisions.
How do you decide on who you're going to partner with?
Well, basically, you have to have a need. We're obviously not going to help people who are independently wealthy or comfortable build or repair their homes, but you also have to have some means of support. Now, when we deal with the disabled or elderly, which we do a lot in the United States, obviously their incomes are fairly limited. But they do have to have a commitment to repay on terms they can afford over time. And they also have a commitment either from themselves or their family members and friends to work alongside our partners. We call it sweat equity. And with a new house, sometimes that can mean as much as 350 hours of working on the home. So they have an actual investment, even if it's not a financial investment in the project. They actually have a physical sweat investment in what, and then we find that helps them maintain a sense of pride and ownership in the property.
So where are you currently working on homes?
Many places. Our headquarters is in Americus, Georgia, but we work around the world. We like to say the sun never sets on the Fuller Center. We work everywhere from Papua New Guinea and Nepal, and all across Africa, and about 6 countries there, and in Latin America, our operations are very strong in places like Nicaragua and El Salvador, Peru, and then, like I say, basically from coast to coast in the United States.
So how do places that need assistance find out about you? Do you reach out to them, or do they come looking for you?
We actually do not plant partners anywhere or chapters. We basically wait for people to come to us. Now, we spread the word through churches and through our partners around the world, and generally what happens is someone sees what's happening in a place like Las Penitas, Nicaragua, or Nuevo Cuscatlán, El Salvador, and they say, wow, how in the world did this 90 homes go up in 1 year? And it's word of mouth tends to get around. They say, oh, I like the Fuller Center's concept. We find that when people find out what we're up to and the way we work and the Christian principles behind it, that they tend to like it, and word gets around.
Do you see this as an opportunity to share the gospel?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that's what the entire ministry is all about. Millard Fuller called it theology of the hammer. And we believe that when you tell people about the gospel, they don't always listen. But when you show people what the gospel is all about, when you build faith with a hammer, they have a tendency to pay attention. So we consider that every house we build is a sermon of God's love, and that's how we preach the gospel, through action.
I was looking at your website, and I saw something entitled Enlightened Charity. Can you talk about that for us?
Well, we believe that there's a time to give handouts, in the wake of an emergency or something like that. But we believe that over time, handouts can actually be diminishing. And we've seen that in Haiti, where we work. And, for decades, a bunch of well-meaning charity, a lot of Christian charity, actually exacerbated the culture of dependency in Haiti. So what we've done is spread the partnership housing through Haiti, and we've built nearly 200 homes there since the earthquake. And we believe that's catching on, and we just believe that there's a sense of self-reliance that is affirmed, through this ministry, through enlightened charity, rather than through handouts. We consider it a hand up. A lot of organizations say they provide a hand up, but we believe we actually do.
Do you need volunteers there in the Americas area?
We need volunteers all over the place. We have a global builders program that actually sends teams of volunteers to more than a dozen countries. And we have a U.S. builders program that sends teams to various U.S. partners, and each local operation, whether Americas is one of our U.S. builders hosts, but so are places like Macon and Hammond, Louisiana, where they've had a lot of flooding. We have a lot of opportunities for volunteers, not just in Americas, but across the country and around the world.
We mentioned sharing Christ with others through the spreading of the gospel. Do you have to be a Christian to be affiliated with the Fuller Center?
No, absolutely not. We've had Jewish groups work with us. We have plenty of non-believers who have worked with us. We've helped Christians and Muslims and Jewish families and Hindu families in places like India. But one thing we have found, that a lot of people who may have had doubts about their faith or who had left the church, we've actually seen people go to work with us, not believe in the ministry aspect of it, just believed in helping people have decent places to live, and come back changed and come back, recommitted to giving the church one more try, giving it another look. And we just think that whenever you help people, and basically, the Bible says, love thy neighbor. And when you actually do that, when you really put that into action, I think it stirs something in people to take, at least, if nothing else, to take a second look and, maybe there's more of this than I thought.
A little bit of walking the walk, right?
Absolutely.
So how is the center funded?
We do not accept government funds to build with. A lot of people may not agree with that, but we find that government funds come with a lot of red tape, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of rules that can sometimes hamstring what you're doing. So we rely exclusively on the generosity of donors, private donors, and companies, and church groups, and individual churches and denominations. We are completely privately funded.
I think everybody listening realizes that the need for good housing worldwide is, in some ways, I think it's probably overwhelming. So I would guess that the resources that the Fuller Center has are not able to match that total need. How do you decide who you assist?
Well, we leave it to those very local communities. And what we think we're doing in places like Nicaragua, we'll work in one poor village and build 100 homes. We believe we plant seeds there that spread. And Millard believed that every person on earth deserves a simple, decent place to lie their heads at night. And obviously it may sound like somewhat of a crazy dream, but you've got to aim big. And I don't think normal folks change the world very often, but Millard had a pretty wild idea, and there are millions of people who now have decent homes thanks to that crazy vision. But we're not the only housing group out there, but we are one of the, I believe, just most determined Christian grassroots groups out there. We believe that the seeds that we plant, not just the house count themselves, but those seeds, they will spread over time, we do believe.
So Chris, tell me why Millard Fuller left Habitat for Humanity.
Well, Millard had operated for decades, kind of with a very loose leash, I would say. He would have grand visions, and he'd go to his board and he'd say, let's do this, and it'd be some crazy idea, and they'd say, great, Miller, go for it, and he'd get it done. Well, over time, and particularly through the 90s, they had a lot of businessmen join the Habitat board as Habitat grew, and there's something to be said for that. But he would come up with these great ideas, these grand ideas, and the board would say, "That sounds great, Miller. Let's see a business plan." And he'd be like, "Business plan?" He operated on faith more than with responsible business planning, and faith had got him where he was going. And over time, they eventually just clashed too much, and he wanted, they got rid of him, but he said, he didn't see the word retirement anywhere in the Bible, so he wanted to keep building homes. And so Miller and Linda founded the Fuller Center as basically a way to get back to the very, grassroots Christian principles they started with.
As many times as I've looked, I haven't found the retirement clause in the Bible either.
No, and he died of an aortic aneurysm in 2009, but he literally worked up until the day he died, and he just absolutely loved it. I mean, he was working into that evening before he started to have pains, and we lost him the next day.
Wow, that's inspiring. Chris, how can listeners learn more, and how can they help the Fuller Center?
Well, of course, like I said, we rely exclusively on private donations, so financial support is crucial. We also rely on volunteers to get the work done. I mean, we employ local laborers in places like Haiti and Nicaragua, but we also need the volunteers to work alongside the people, not just to supply the labor, but to inspire folks. So the best thing people can do is go to fullercenter.org, take a look around, learn what our principle's about, read about our history. You'll find an awful lot of updates and news on the site. We try to keep it fresh with things that are going on. So follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Twitter. So just get involved and pray for us. We can always use the prayers for success. But things are growing. We're doing fantastic. Last year was our most successful year ever, and we believe 2017 will be even more so.
Chris Johnson, Director of Communications for the Fuller Center in Americas. Thank you so very much for coming on our program.
Thank you, Calvin. I appreciate it.
And can you give us that website one more time?
Sure. It's fullercenter.org.
Great. Chris, again, thank you so much.